Craig is a difficult name to pronounce. Even many of my English friends find it hard to pronounce, but I have to say I'm learning Spanish and your names are pretty difficult as well. 8 years ago, I was asked by a marine biologist, a friend, to have a look at a problem that she'd heard about, which was plastic. And as a surfer and a diver and a documentary filmmaker, she thought that this may be an issue that I had seen when I was in the ocean environment and that I could provide feedback on. And my answer was, no, I haven't. I don't know what you're talking about. We went on a documentary filming expedition to Sri Lanka. I was given the opportunity to film blue whales for the first time. And these are animals I'd been studying since I was a child. And they're very rare creatures. They're massive. They grow to 37 meters in length. They're like big spaceships. But they're very hard to find because they were almost hunted to extinction. But we found a family off the coast of Sri Lanka, or our scientists did. And so we went there to try and film them for the first time underwater. And we spent 3 weeks going up and down the coast, trying to find these animals. And on the last day, we had to turn back and go to port because our visa was about to run out. And to our luck, we came across a family that was feeding off the continental shelf of Sri Lanka. And we got to film these animals for the first time. And it was an incredible experience to be so close to an animal that is so large, yet so scarce, so hard to find. And they had a juvenile, a baby, a juvenile, 15 meters long, a very big juvenile. And I got to get very close to this animal and look it in the eye. And it was a profound experience for me as a naturalist and somebody who grew up by the ocean and had a deep connection with the sea. Here I was connecting with a very special species that meant a great deal to the biodiversity and the ecosystem that it lived in. Shortly after we finished filming these animals, we came across something that devastated me. And it was a slick of plastic that was about 300 meters long and about 200 meters wide. And it was floating on the surface right above the continental shelf where these blue whales were feeding. Now, blue whales feed by opening their mouths, taking in great liters of water and siphoning the krill, tiny fish, from the water. But they can't tell the difference between krill and plastic. So these animals were feeding in this area where this plastic was. And I suddenly realized that they were taking in a product that we'd made and discarded without thought for their well-being or even our own. So they were eating this plastic, unaware of what the consequences of that was or what it would do. And that was the impetus to go and make a plastic ocean, because I wondered what animals were suffering elsewhere on the planet and whether the plastic we'd found in the Indian Ocean was also floating in the North Pacific Ocean or the South Pacific or in Antarctica. How bad was this problem? When you consider that this year we're going to produce about 350 million tons of plastic. Think about that. 350 million tons. It's a big number. Half of that plastic is plastic that we call single-use plastic. Single-use plastic, straws, plastic bags, plastic bottles. These are things that we use every day. The problem with these products is that they have a shelf life of about 12 minutes, and then we throw them away. But think about that. Where is away? To us, away is in the rubbish bin, and then we forget about it. But away, there is no such thing as away, because that plastic has to go somewhere. And the reason it has to go somewhere is because plastic is the most durable product we have ever made. It's the strongest, most resilient product. Think about that. How can something that is the strongest, most durable product we have ever made be disposable? The concept doesn't work because if we dispose of it, it's going to stay around. And that's actually what has happened to every piece of plastic we have ever made, unless we've burnt it, is still on the planet in some way, shape, or form. And 8 million tons of plastic every year is finding its way through our river systems, through our lakes, and into our oceans, where it's contaminating our oceans like a disease. And the problem with plastic is when it enters the ocean, it acts like a sponge for other toxins because they like the molecular structure of plastic. So toxins from mining, toxins from industrial runoff, agricultural runoff, pesticides, stick to the plastic because they don't like water molecules. But when the plastic breaks up into smaller and smaller pieces, it looks and smells to fish and wildlife and birds like food. And they consume this plastic. And what happens is the toxins on the plastic release from the plastic because they like fatty tissue and they bioaccumulate in the fatty tissue of animals. So a plankton eats a tiny piece of plastic, a microfiber. A sardine eats the plankton. A bigger fish eats the sardine. A bluefin tuna eats the bigger fish. And guess who's at the top of the food chain? We are. We consume the bluefin tuna or other top chain species. And we contaminate our own bodies. A study that was done in 2003 in the United States showed that 92.6% of every American had chemicals associated with plastics in their bodies. That's a large number of people. What was horrifying about the statistic was that their children between the ages of 6 and 11 had twice as much plastic as the adults. And the reason was, when a woman gives birth and breastfeeds her baby, she downloads all of the nutrients from her body, good and bad, into the baby. So the babies, our babies, are starting off with this toxic download, and then straight away, they're introduced into a plastic society. They're wrapped in a plastic nappy. They're fed milk from a plastic bottle with a plastic nipple. They eat food from plastic jars. And our children are suffering from the consequences of our plastic addiction. And the problem with plastic is it doesn't matter whether you're poor, whether you're rich, where you live, in Colombia, America, Australia, Tasmania, where I'm from, it does not care. It will contaminate your food source and it will affect human health no matter who you are. And the reason it will do that is because you threw that single-use plastic item in the bin thinking it was going away. The problem we have is that we tend to blame other people for this addiction. We blame, for example, the 6 highest polluting, ocean polluting countries on the planet are in Asia: China, Indonesia, India, the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam. We point the finger and say, it's not our problem, it's their problem. But guess where their products come from? When we do an analysis on the ocean plastic, we find that their products are made in America, in Australia, in Europe. So whose fault is it? Because they're being encouraged to consume, as we all are. Consume, let's drive business. And they're doing what they're told to do, but they're not being given the tools or the infrastructure to deal with this problem at the other end. And that's where the problem starts. Likewise, I've been to Pacific islands all over the world, islands in different areas where people have been introduced to plastic, like Tuvalu, for instance. In 1978, they gained independence and they started importing plastic products. Now, they live on a coral atoll. You can't bury anything on a coral atoll, it's too hard. What they used to do was grow natural products, bananas, coconuts, and they would throw that on the ground because it would biodegrade. So when they started consuming plastic products, they did the same thing, threw it on the ground. They now have a massive plastic problem. On the north end of the island, the plastic is 10 feet tall, and they've started burning it. And that's creating extra problems because burning plastic creates furans and dioxins, cancer-causing agents, which get into the air, spread, land in the water where their fish are and their pigs are. They eat that, and they have major health problems now: cancer, diabetes, all sorts of endocrine disruptive disorders. that they really aren't aware locally where these came from. We've got scientists trying to test this now to put the link there with plastic because that's where we think it comes from. And thankfully, thank you to Carlos and Tresla Perlet Foundation and the Attorney General and the Chamber of Commerce here. I've been invited to have a look at Colombia and to go to Santa Marta and visit the indigenous people and have a look at what's happening there and the river systems there. And I'm keen to have a look to see whether what I've seen in other parts of the world are actually happening here in Colombia as well. The one message that the film aims to do is to show that single-use plastic is toxic when it gets into the environment and should never be put there in the first place. We need to rethink single-use plastic. We need to rethink the way we use this product. And that means we need to look at solutions. And solutions, there is no one solution. We need to look at solutions across the board because we're all in this together. And we need to bring everyone to the table. Manufacturers, retailers, consumers, and governments all need to come together to talk about this because we're all stakeholders. And we need to move businesses into new technology, new plastic polymers that don't infect the environment. We need to look at the way we retail as consumers. How do we spend and be smarter about the way we spend? But this ultimately leads back to each and every one of us because it starts with us and it starts with us at home. I don't use a straw at home, so why do I need one when I go to a restaurant? I don't. Do I really need to pay 2,000% more for water in a plastic bottle than I would if I filtered it at home and put it in a steel container and carried that around with me? Of course I don't. Do I need a plastic bag at a supermarket when I can just put it in my backpack? No. These are things we need to change our habit on. What we call a wave of change. And a wave of change is our hashtag line. And it's become very important to us because as we show the film, and we have a 22-minute version of the feature film, which is an hour and 40 minutes long, we show that to school children. And when I show it to kids, it gives me hope because kids know we have a problem, more than adults. I can start my talk halfway in compared to the talk I give to children because they know the problem and all they want are the tools to change the problem. And so that's what we're trying to do, but it starts with awareness. And we all need to become aware. And this is where conferences like the one you're attending today is so important because we come together and we share not only our experiences, but we share our research and our knowledge. And that's vital if we're to act together towards providing sustainability and protecting our environment. Because we're all in this together. The Earth is really just an island and we have nowhere else to go. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like you all to join me and become a wave of change and to change our plastic habit. Thank you.